Joined now by Advocate Paul Hoffman from the organisation Accountability Now. Paul, thank you so much for joining us. I know that you listened to the President's speech. Did you find it encouraging?
I'm afraid not, Sally. Good evening, and good evening to your viewers as well. The President mouthed a lot of platitudes. He behaved as if he was opening a cattle show or a buffalo auction. He wasn't seriously engaged with what needs to be done about the scourge of corruption that is threatening our democratic order every single day in so many different ways. I would have expected the President to get to grips with the binding nature of the decision of the Constitutional Court in the Glenister litigation, which set out the criteria by which the anti-corruption machinery of state ought to be set up. He didn't even touch on it, not in any way, shape, or form. I would have expected him to explain not only to the public of South Africa, but also to the ANC National Executive Committee, why it is that his cabinet, having been instructed formally by that NEC to establish a standalone, permanent, independent entity to deal with corruption, has simply not gone ahead on that at all. Instead, they're trying to paint some lipstick on the pig that is called the Investigating Directorate and turn it into a reincarnation of the Scorpions, who were effective, but had that all-important Achilles heel, their lack of security of tenure of office, which is something that was addressed in the Glenister judgment of the Constitutional Court. I would have also expected the President to say something about the idea that the best practice way of seeing off the corrupt would be to set up a new Chapter 9 institution, what the DA calls an anti-corruption commission, because that idea has the support of the official opposition, of the IFP, of the Defend Our Democracy campaign, and of various civil society and faith-based organizations. All of that, we waited in vain to hear the President talk about that. So I found his address a little underwhelming, even though he did come in late.
You know, we frequently hear our law enforcement authorities saying that when a crime happens, and it's not just corruption, but many forms of crime, there are people in the community or people at work who know what's going on, encouraging people to come forward and blow the whistle. Both the President and the Chief Justice spoke about the need for better protection for whistleblowers. But when you see this couple that was gunned down outside the Randburg court this morning, and we understand that the woman was testifying that she'd been assaulted by police, that was what that particular case was about. Is it any wonder that members of the community are perhaps too afraid to speak out?
Yes, no, I think that whistleblowers in South Africa are actually an endangered species. The Chief Justice says incentivize whistleblowers, and the Department of Justice produces whistleblower protection legislation that is hopelessly inadequate and has now been taken back to the drawing board. And all the while, whistleblowers remain in jeopardy. People who blow whistles are really the heroes of the state capture project. If whistles had not been blown, if the Gupta leaks had not taken place, if the investigative journalists had not been brave enough to publish, we would still be in the full grip of the Gupta-inspired state capture project.
Of course, we know that corruption didn't end when the Zondo Commission made its findings. I mean, in fact, the COVID pandemic brought with it a whole rash of new forms of corruption. Are we nonetheless a little bit better today than we were in those years?
No, I'm afraid we're not. I'm afraid that the situation is going to be perpetuated for so long as the cabinet, and it seems to be the cabinet more than the parliamentary ANC. The cabinet refuses to engage with the draft legislation that accountability now made available to it in August 2021, when it became clear that the NEC of the ANC's resolution was not being acted on by cabinet. They seem to be willing to ignore that the Shadow Minister of Justice has a private member's bill or two to address the scourge of corruption. That doesn't even qualify for a mention in the deliberations at this conference that the President opened today. And you're left with the impression that they're trying to make themselves look good and to be engaged in anti-corruption work, when what they in fact are doing is kicking the can down the road until at least after the next general election, or until all of the comrades who have been involved in corruption have emigrated to Dubai or elsewhere and have stashed their loot where nobody has the political will to go looking for it. It really is a serious situation. And until those in government take corruption seriously as the democracy-threatening phenomenon that it is, we are going to continue to be in a situation where the poor in South Africa are robbed blind by the corrupt in South Africa. COVID-preneurism cannot be blamed on Jacob Zuma. He was not in office when COVID struck. So it really is an ongoing problem that is not being properly addressed by cabinet because of the paralysis in the ANC, which itself is infested with corrupt people.
All right. Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening. Advocate Paul Hoffman from the organisation Accountability Now, just giving us his assessment of what the President and the Chief Justice had to say at that anti-corruption summit today.